Okay. All righty. Good to know. All right. Well,
Mr. Chair, the sound is going in and out, just so you know.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. If we're going to begin the public comment portion, or try to. Members of the public will be provided an opportunity to speak. Before making your comments, please seek recognition and state your name. We'd like you to limit your comments due to the increasing time constraints of this meeting. But speakers who have called on the phone, you can press *6 to unmute yourself. If you're not speaking, please keep yourself muted. So with that, Simon, is anyone on the line for public comment or any public comment in the room? Anybody out there want to say anything? Assuming they can hear me. Perhaps it's a leap of faith. I'll give it a second. Okay, then we'll move on. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the March 9, 2023 regular meeting. Draft minutes were distributed with the meeting materials. Any comments, concerns, corrections to the minutes from the March meeting? Matt, can you hear us? Matt Brockman? Nope.
I'm here. I'd like to abstain when the vote comes.
There you go. He can hear us. Hallelujah. I would ask the nonsensical question, can anyone not hear us, but we'll work with it. Okay, so he's abstaining from the minutes vote. Yes, ma'am?
One correction to the minutes. There seems to be some highlighting in the font area. We wanted to clean that up before we vote.
Okay, appreciate that.
With that change, I move approval.
We've got a motion for approval of the minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hamilton. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Any abstentions? Mr.
Aye.
Brockman abstained, I believe.
Yep.
We'll move along then. Next item on our agenda is the City of Hartford Subcommittee update. We had written update was provided with your meeting materials. Can we get the staff to give us an update on the subcommittee for the City of Hartford?
Yeah. Good morning. So we held our subcommittee meeting on March the 23rd, and many of the items that are listed here from the subcommittee are going to be discussed today on the agenda items. So the first two items, which is the conference assistance and bond refunding, and the tentative agreement for the Board of Ed labor contract, those items will be discussed today. So I'm not going to give you any further discussion on that. The grant list we discussed at the last meeting, and in addition to that was the Board of Ed provided some update, but we're going to have a further update today from the Board of Ed. We heard about the budget mitigation measures, and that there has two significant grants that have come through, $9 million for the Riverfront Park and $2 million for bond funding for the Bushnell Park Green Walk. There hasn't been a lot of work in the energy efficiency as a staff coordinated position is taken, and we have also kicked off the Milliman contract, meeting with Milliman and Mr. Penn from the Board of Ed, and Mr. Penn was fantastic at responding rather rapidly and getting Milliman all of the data that they needed. So thank you for that. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any discussion of the subcommittee report? Any members of the subcommittee want to say anything? We'll move on then to our next item on our agenda, which is the review, discussion, and possible action on a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of refunding bonds up to $138 million. Provided in the meeting materials is a draft resolution of the amendment to the contract for state assistance and the City of Hartford's preliminary official statement. We have, if she can hear me, Sarah Sanders from the Treasurer's Office to give us a presentation on this.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, We did talk to the subcommittee, and we did give the full Marb board a little bit of a heads up on this, but this is a transaction that the city of Hartford is issuing refunding bonds at the request of the state treasurer and the secretary of OPM, so that the general fund can achieve some savings. We're estimating at least $10 million over the next 10 years. So we've been working with a working group with the city of Hartford to get this transaction to market. We plan to sell the bonds in under 2 weeks and to post our preliminary official statement after the, hopefully we have Marb approval today. And the closing is scheduled for May. So I'm here with Ernie Lormer, bond counsel to our office from Soder and Associates. If there's any questions on the resolution for Marb to approve the issuance of up to 138 million of refunding bonds by the city of Hartford.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So because this is a contract for state assistance, and we believe it's within the type of contract that the Marb should pass on because it involves the city under Tier 3 oversight, we need to take a vote on it to approve it. It does inure to the benefit of the state, as Sarah indicated, so I'm very much in favor for that reason. Any questions, Mr. White?
Yes, I'm very much in favor. This is, it's good, but an extraneous question. For how long is Hartford under our jurisdiction? What does it take for them not to have to come here? Because I know the bonds, the state takeover of the bonds triggered oversight. I do know that there's been a substantial reduction in the bondedness, and there hasn't been new bonding. I'm just curious if anyone.
As long as they have a contract assistance.
Well, we have the mayor here who has a perspective on that question. You want to come over here? Or
Thank you. Bob, I believe I can answer that question. So, you are in part correct, but I think it's just slightly more complicated than that. In terms of Marb supervision, there are a series of metrics that need to be met, all of which have been met by the city of Hartford, with one exception, which is that Moody's has not yet bumped us up to investment grade. So all the ratings have to be at investment grade. We're actually going into a Moody's review. Both Moody's and S&P have upgraded the city multiple times, year over year over year over year, since the reduction in the depth of our fiscal crisis. But Moody's is not yet at that threshold that would allow us to seek to be taken out of Marb for Marb Tier 3 supervision. However, even if we're not under Marb Tier 3 supervision, one of the conditions of the contract assistance agreement is that there are still certain reporting requirements and review requirements, which also speak to the issuance of debt. So, in other words, to the extent that there were future refunding, even if the city were not under Marb, that would still be constrained by the contract assistance.
Mayor, I confess I haven't researched this before this meeting, but does the contract provide for, does it make provision about the Marb jurisdiction, or does it just talk about reporting requirements?
I don't believe that it speaks to Marb. I think the reporting is to OPM and the Treasurer's Office. We can confirm that. But I think one's out of Marb jurisdiction, but there are other both constraints and reporting obligations still hold.
So the only thing keeping you in Marb at this point is the Tier 3 requirement?
What I don't recall off the top of my head is the process, by which we would seek to get out from under Marb.
Right.
But I believe that the only metric that hasn't been hit is the final rating adjustment. That said, I can't, as you know, I'm here for 8 more months. I can't speak to how my discussion will do this question. I don't want to get out from under Tier 3 supervision. I actually find it to be valuable to have the independent review, to have the discipline that's imposed by that process. and to have the opportunity, frankly, to open our books and share our numbers, because, when my team came in and confronted that fiscal crisis, one of the big challenges at the start was a lack of trust and confidence in our projections and in our numbers. So I like having a third-party entity that's looking over our shoulder, that when we say, these are what our numbers, we have an independent entity that says, they're right. So that's my own view. We're not in any hurry to change that, but from a legal standpoint, I believe that rating, the rating metric is the only thing that we're seeking to be out from under work.
Thank you. I move approval unless there's of the refunding.
We have a motion to approve the amendment to the contract,
I will second that.
seconded by Mr. Hamilton. Any further discussion from the board? Don't see any hands up. Therefore, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion appears to carry. Contract amendment is approved. Sarah, anything else from us?
No, thank you very much.
I think I have to sign something at some point.
Yes. Always.
Okay. Next item on our agenda, thank you, Mr. Mayor, is, unless you're going to speak on some of these other, review and discussion and possible action of labor contracts. We have a tentative agreement between the Hartford Board of Education and Child Development Associates, Local 1018F. This is a labor contract effective retroactively from 7/1/18 through 6/30/26 for 61 Child Development Associates. It provides for a 2% general wage increase retroactive to last August, and for each year thereafter, plus step movements until June 30th of 26. A summary of the agreement, projected financial impact, and step analysis, and additional information, as well as a draft agreement were provided in the materials. This contract has been reviewed, discussed, and the recommendation was made by the subcommittee to take this to the full board. And I think we have someone from the Board of Ed here to talk about this. Are there questions on this issue from the board? Anything you want to say about it, sir?
What you said. No, this is our 9th labor contract. We've done it maybe 18 months or so. There was a very concerted effort to get caught up on all the past due labor agreements that we had in the Board of Education. There are 2 more in active discussion right now, so 10 and 11. 12 have not expired until this coming June, and then I think we start cycling all over again. But I'm glad that we've gotten to this point. And just for the public background, Child Development Associates are non-certified staff members that teach in our pre-K programs, except in our magnet schools, and the magnet schools are required to be certified staff.
So the provisions of this contract are covered in your budget and in your 5-year plan?
Yes.
Are there questions? Mr. Hamilton?
Yeah, just since I'm not on the subcommittee, you probably discussed this subcommittee, but in terms of the delay in getting this contract, I mean, obviously it went back quite a ways. Was there anything in particular holding it up, or is there any explanation as to why it was unsettled for such a long period of time?
Yeah, that delay predates my involvement in the district. I know COVID threw off the routines on a number of different contracts. I also know some of the financial duress that the city and the board were under, and during some of that period also had an impact on this. But, there's at least one more coming that got an equally long delay that we're in negotiations with right now. But the intent is now that we've got sort of a process in place, and so we sort of pace these out in terms of their ending expiration date, so that we don't have all 12 coming due in the same year, that there is some logic to the way that we structured that, so that we have 3 or 4 come due in each year. We can pace our way through those.
Okay. I guess the other thing is really more of a comment. I noticed you did, I think it was some sort of tuition reimbursement, or there was an increase in tuition reimbursement, and it sort of triggered in my head whether or not this group is one that the district looks to potentially for appropriate employees to move into certified positions as part of a sort of diversity recruitment effort among your teaching staff. Is that sort of in your game plan, or is that something that you're working on?
Yes, and that's actually something that we've been intentional about in the way that we've increased the tuition reimbursements across several contracts. The paraprofessionals in this contract actually require the two groups that are most closely associated with what you're describing, a potential pool of future teachers, and so we try to encourage people to take advantage of that tuition reimbursement as part of the overall benefit package.
Well, I certainly applaud you for that move.
Thank you. Other questions? Comments on the tentative agreement to be approved by the board? Is there a motion then?
So moved.
Mr. White moves approval. Any second? Mr. Waxenberg is signaling a second? Or did you have a question?
No, correct, second.
Okay, we've got a motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it, motion carries. Contract is approved by the Marb. Thank you. Next item on our agenda, don't go anywhere, is the Board of Education proposed budget for FY '24. At the subcommittee meeting last month, Mr. Penn gave the update on the '24 budget, FY '24, and discussed the pathways to mitigate a budget gap that existed at the time. This proposed budget was finalized prior to the meeting and provided in the meeting materials, and it does balance. And the Board of Ed is here to answer questions.
Sure, and just before I add some additional clarity on that, it almost balances.
Uh-oh.
I would say we had just under a $2 million cap built into the budget going into next year, with a commitment to our board to try to figure out a way to mitigate that over the next 16 months or so until the budget is fully expended, through either a combination of additional revenues that we take in or additional expense cuts that we make along the way. But we're acutely aware of where we were on that. We actually shared that with the city council at a presentation that passed, I think it was Tuesday that we were there. And recognizing that that represents less than half of 1% of our overall operating budget, I feel that we can work pretty aggressively to get that solved for. And my preference, frankly, is to try and figure out new revenue sources to get there. We're pretty aggressive in terms of going after competitive grants that we see that can be augmenting our ability to pay for some of that. The intent is to bring everything back in line as soon as possible. And with some additional grant support that we've pulled into the district recently, I think we have a strong opportunity to do that.
You do have control of the expenditure side, though.
Sure.
In terms of what we call forced lapse. We would not do a budget that counts on going for revenue, and maybe we get it, maybe we don't. We have to project what we pretty sure we're going to get,
Sure.
and then balance that against what we think we're going to spend. At least the way I've been told, we have to do it at the state level. So,
one of the things that gives you, so sorry.
Go ahead. That's good.
One of the things that gives you sort of greater confidence around that, and you're absolutely right, is the expense side that we have more direct control over, is that we're currently running at an 11% vacancy rate. What's baked into the budget for next year is only a 6% vacancy rate. I think it's highly unlikely that we get down to 6% between now and July. So that anything that we have in the vacancy that's above that becomes accretive to that conversation.
Okay. Other questions about the proposed budget? I take it we're not voting today? Is that the plan?
It gets included with the entire budget when we do it.
This is just the BOE portion. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it allows us the opportunity to flush through this, so there's no questions when we get it.
So May or June, we'll do the full budget. Okay.
And
Yes.
just a question, follow up on
Sure.
your question. Do you understand that the budget that will be asked to approve will have a gap in the board budget with all the measures that you talked about trying to close it? I mean, I have some confidence that you can do it, but what will we be improving?
It would be the number that we're trying to get, to say this the right way. It's the full value of the expense side of the equation, right? So right now, our expenses exceed our projected revenues by about $2 million. So what we're including is the additional is the higher number, which is the expense number that we're trying to solve for.
But you should show it as a balanced budget with a forced lapse of $2 million, right?
Yeah, so we've included it as an expense task within that number that's yet identified at this point. So it will force to a balanced budget on the revenue number.
Mhm.
Correct. But it's an unqualified task, isn't it?
So you'll have a plug number on
It's
the
a
revenue.
plug. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
Or cuts.
Right.
Or cuts.
It's a budgeted item that you have to identify.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mr. Waxenberg has his hand up.
Couple questions. You've got about over 200 positions funded out of COVID money. How are you going to move them over once the COVID money is gone?
Well, I think the first question is how many stay with us after the COVID money is gone? We were very intentional about the way that we made those hires, that in the offering that we made to those candidates, they were very specific around these are grant-funded positions, and the grant goes away at a particular date. So, you know, we are actually in an exercise right now going through all of our remaining COVID money, all of our long-term plans around what stays and what we really want to stay, because we know it provides a very direct fit to academic outcomes and better outcomes for the kids. That's not going to be an easy exercise, but we know we need to accomplish that over the next year before the last of the grants run through. But we were very careful about the way that we made those hires to let them know that this position exists only as long as the grant funding exists with it.
And one more, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I asked the last time at our subcommittee, if you look at page 54, which I don't expect you to have in front of you, that's the 2 million for Achievement First. Obviously, by statute, you're not obligated to do this. You apparently, from what I understand with the superintendent, have some sort of an agreement with Achievement First to provide in-kind services for them, and that expires pretty soon. And I know there's a hook in there about expanding money when you don't have money. So I guess my question is, you're funding schools that are not in your school system by a memorandum of understanding. I understand, I think. So I need to know what your long-term plan is. My understanding is the superintendent does not plan to re-up that memorandum of understanding, because the 2 million is better spent on the kids that are in the Hartford school system than in a separate school system. So can you share what your the long-term outlook is for the funding of this type of school?
Only partially, in that I raised the issue with the deputy superintendent, which I currently report, made him aware of the fact that there is an upcoming expiration on that agreement, to make sure that that was a priority for the superintendent. So I actually appreciated the nudge that you gave us in the last meeting to say we need to go back and look at that, as we are at the end of what was a 5-year extension for the last time that this was done. So I'm not 100% sure it's accurate to say that she's looking to terminate that contract, without having had to speak with her directly, which I have not had an opportunity to. But clearly, you know, there is pressure on our system, where if we were to retire that contract, the value of that contract would become back into our system. Coincidentally, I think it's around the same amount of money that we're short going into next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waxenberg. Other questions, comments on the BOE proposed budget?
If I could just add one
Yeah.
more comment, Mr. Secretary. We were asked last time for a couple to distribute a copy of our budget book. I think you all have now. It's lengthy. There's a fair amount of information in it. Mostly at the school level, that's what comprises most of it. You can see movement within school positions, school overall budget, what the demographic breakdown of all those students within those schools are. There's information in there that rolls up a lot of what we've been presenting through, I think it's now 14 presentations that we've made publicly around the budget. But if anybody's got any specific questions around the information there, I didn't want to go through a page turn exercise for a 90-page document, but if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them before you get to a full vote on the city budget.
We appreciate that. If members have questions, they could funnel them through the staff, and we could gather those and send them to the BOE in advance of the next meeting, which might be helpful. So with that, if there are no further questions or comments, we'll move on from that item. Thank you for coming in. And the next item on our agenda is to review and discuss the monthly financials for the city from February of '23. Monthly financial report was provided in the meeting materials. The city and the board are here to provide an update.
Good morning again.
Good morning again, Mr. Mayor. Please proceed.
So as you see in our report, and I apologize, I don't have the paper in front of me, but our projected year end is $3 million more favorable than our last report. That's driven primarily by improvements on the revenue side. That includes quite favorable tax collection. We've collected, I believe, 99.7% of full year projected property tax revenue as of February, which means that anything that we collect, have collected and will collect the remainder of the year is contributing to additional positive variance there. And as you know, we also have continued to have positive interest rate revenue because of the interest rate environment. So overall, I believe that we are looking at a $4 million positive revenue variance from our last report. And I will say, I think that this projection remains conservative, particularly because we collected such a large portion of our budget tax revenue, and we do anticipate collecting more in the next few months of this fiscal year. I think we will continue to see improvement there as well. On the expense side, there are a few things that are included. We've talked at prior meetings about the higher utility costs, which remain roughly $700,000 over budget, and then legal costs. That includes a fairly substantial workers' comp settlement that was in settlement of a complicated COVID-related case, and it also includes litigation expenses associated with the ongoing litigation surrounding the ballpark and the parcels around there. Those are not new, except for the settlement. But the other thing that I will highlight is there is some additional expense taken in this budget, in this report, one piece of which is for the acquisition of 81 Bartholomew Avenue, which we've discussed at prior meetings, but it's a large commercial parcel on Bartholomew Avenue, which is in the heart of our Parkville redevelopment district, and we wanted to secure that because it's critical to our overall redevelopment strategy in the area. That's a $2.1 million purchase price. And then other use is $1.7 million that we dedicated towards promotion of homeownership preservation and homeownership promotion. So there's a part of that program, part of that funding goes to support grant seniors who are trying to stay in their homes and need to make repairs, and some of it is a grant program for Hartford employees to incentivize purchasing a home in the city of Hartford. All those expenditures represent the use of the unbudgeted MRSA allocation that came from the state. So as you recall, we did not budget for MRSA last year, but MRSA came, and that's how we chose to use that unbudgeted revenue in ways that we think represent in long-term investments, not ongoing operational costs. But that does show up in expense on the expense side. So that's a quick summary. I do think that we'll have some continued improvement. It may be substantial improvement over the next few months.
What does balance look like at this point?
I'm sorry?
What does balance look like?
Our fund balance?
Yeah, for 23.
At present, Leanne can probably jump on with the exact number. At present, I think our fund balance is just shy of 5% of budget. And I believe that with the surplus that we project, we'll be able to get it up over 6% of budget. I have to commit to that, but I believe that we'll be able to do that as we finalize fiscal year 23. Keeping in mind that we also will continue to dedicate CIP, dedicate surplus to our capital improvement plan, so we can continue our pay-as-you-go approach to capital improvement, and possibly to other long-term investments.
That's what you typically do with surplus?
We have typically split our surplus plus really three ways. First, to building up fund balance. Second, to funding our CIP reserve, our capital investment plan reserve. And third, in recent years, to maintaining the Board of Education's 2% reserve so that they have that additional source of revenue to use in their budget. So I think it's important to stress that while our budget does not, the proposed budget, which you're not reviewing today, but our proposed budget for fiscal year 24 does not increase education spending. It does anticipate, we do anticipate, not the budget, but we do anticipate continued use of that 2% reserve on the Board of Education side. So in practice, it really is an increase, as it has been in the last couple of years, an increase relative to what's actually in the budget.
It's good to have a surplus.
Good, and again, one of the commitments that we made to others and to ourselves was to maintain our capital improvement plan without borrowing, and this allows us to do that.
Jealous.
Now, I will stress that, I can emphasize now, even in the budget that we submit, we do anticipate the use of that forthcoming surplus for some of the capital improvement work that's already underway, but that's laid out in the budget, and I think consistent with our best practice.
Mr. Waxenberg, you still have your hand up. Do you have a question for the mayor, or?
No, just my forgetfulness.
That's okay. Any questions for the mayor, or for the city, or for the board on where they are in their financials at the moment? Mr. Hamilton seems to have a question.
I'm not sure if I got that on or not, but anyway, I had a question for Mr. Penn, actually. Your explanation talked about, I believe it was in reference to, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it. I believe it was a staff retention bonus, and I don't remember that, and it's probably my failure to recall it, but can you tell us a little bit about what that retention bonus was? Was that part of the labor contracts? Was that something that was negotiated outside the labor contracts, or what exactly was that?
So the retention bonus was something that we had done at the end of the last school year. In May is when we announced it, as an attempt to try to maintain and retain staff within the district. So it was $1,000 per individual if you came back, if you were there at the end of 21-22 and you came back at the end of, during 22-23, if you were still there by January, we would pay it out in February. So it was intended to be something that retained, particularly our teachers, our paraeducators, people that were directly involved in the classroom. And it was COVID funded. It was not anything that came out of our general fund budgets or other grants. This was an appropriate use within our ESSER funds. The efficacy of the retention bonus is somewhat debatable, and so we're going to consider whether or not we're going to actually pay one for the following year as well. It is in our ESSER plan spending, but we're not sure that we're going to use it to that extent. We still had a fairly significant amount of turnover over the summer, and what we're thinking is that either the $1,000 is not substantial enough to influence behavior, or people were action that if they were able to get better offers somewhere else, even walking away from the $1,000, they were still better off taking the higher offer.
Okay. I think I vaguely am recalling it now. So it was something that was discussed when you were putting together the COVID, the ESSER adaptation plan.
Yeah, we announced it internally back last May.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for the city, for the board on the financials? Ms. Kidd?
Actually, I do. Mayor, I just wanted you to also bring to this board's attention about the purchase of the 510 Farmington and have this plot here, because that's one of the items of more finance.
Sure. 510 Farmington is a parcel that was subject to a lengthy litigation. It was a zoning dispute, and in partially in settlement and partially just to achieve positive resolution for the community, we acquired that parcel, total cost of $1.8 million. A portion of that acquisition cost, I believe, will be reimbursed from a bond authorization that was made for this purpose. There was a bond authorization that, if I remember correctly, was total of $7 million, $4 million of which was for Farmington Avenue streetscape, and $3 million of which was for acquisition and/or redevelopment of that parcel. Leanne can also correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that $800,000 of that 1.8 will ultimately be reimbursed by the bond allocation, but it should be in there as 1.8 expenditure. Is that right, Leanne?
Correct. I would also add that the resolution that council passed was in June of 2022, and the close was supposed to happen in fiscal year 2022, but it was delayed into fiscal 2023, so we assigned fund balance to cover the 1.8 million purchase. So that's why it stands out at the bottom of the report.
That's also actually why, when you asked me what our fund balance was, I said it's just under 5%, because we were trying to get over 5% last time, and that adjustment put us just under it.
One other question, when you mentioned about the initiative that you have for the homeowners, for the seniors to be able to stay in their home, that was 1.7 million, and is that line item including the initiative that you have for the Hartford workers too, or is that a different line item?
Those two initiatives, they are $1.25 million each for a total of $2.5 million, but there are other sources for the remainder. So that 1.7, I can't remember how it's split, but that 1.7 is a part of that overall 2.5, and the remainder is from other sources, I think, from Hartford.
Thank you. Any other questions for the city of Hartford? Seeing none, thank you for coming in. Good to see you. Oh, Mr. Penn has something to say.
So if I may, Mr. Secretary, the Marb has been very good about offering help when it's needed. There's one issue I want to make the Marb aware about that we're dealing with right now, and this involves our magnet schools, particularly our Hartford residents that attend CREC magnet schools, and how there is a residency requirement in the legislation of the magnet schools that we're in a constant dispute every year with CREC about. And what I'm particularly troubled about is, even though that residency validation requirement is in there, CREC was able successfully to appeal to the State Department of Education for a $1.7 million pullback of our ECS because of disputed students around their residencies. So in effect, our ECS payment that comes out in the April-May timeframe is going to be short $1.7 million. Now, what the CFD will do with that is put it in escrow until there's resolution around the residency issues of those students. But we feel that the City of Hartford and the Board of Ed are being penalized for CREC effectively not doing their job on a timely basis. If that is a statutory requirement that there's residency validation, why are we the ones being penalized as a result of that? It puts the city, particularly in a bad spot, because we're an alliance district. They can't pull back our budgeted number as an alliance district, even if ECS comes up short. So we've worked with the city in past years around some of that issue, but particularly in a year that we're still projecting a deficit, I'm very concerned about this outcome and the fact that CREC was successful in lobbying for an ECS holdback when they were able to.
I will look into it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anything? Any other questions, concerns? Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
I realized with the confusion at the top of the meeting, I didn't give my co-chair a chance to make opening remarks. Ms. Comer, do you have any opening remarks?
Through you, Mr. Secretary, in the interests of time, I will pause.
Thank you, appreciate that. Next item is the City of West Haven and the subcommittee update, and written update was provided with your meeting materials, and staff can provide an update of the West Haven subcommittee meeting.
Good Good morning. So West Haven, we met on March 30th, that was 6 days ago, and here we are again. The mayor's 2024 budget and the 5-year plan was presented at that meeting. It is an agenda item for today, so I'm not going to discuss the details because the full board is going to have an opportunity to hear from Mr. Taylor today about his budget and the process and his assumptions. Another agenda item here is contracts that have not been put forth to the Marb, and that is on the agenda for today. But I think that you'll quickly learn, since we had just met last, I think like a week ago. Anyways, one of the requests from the subcommittee on that particular item was for us to get the backup, so that we would have that for either the sub or the full Marb. And Mr. Fryer is on vacation this week with his children and family, so that item is going to wait for the backup of that, as it was a really quick turnaround. We have a labor contract, a non-labor contract that's going to come forth. It's on the agenda. Open items is on the agenda, and the action plan, we had a very lengthy meeting and we were not able to get to those, so those are for the next meeting. Our next subcommittee will be held on April 27th.
Any questions or comments about the subcommittee's activities? If not, we'll move on. I'm going to take, with the board's indulgence, just take an item out of order. I think it will help set the tone and set the agenda for the city here today. Just to, at the top, let's discuss, I'd like to move down to, under the Tier 4 updates, the update on the Whittlesey assessment. So we are trying to schedule a special meeting. Has it been scheduled for 4/24?
It has.
Okay. So we're going to be having a special meeting on Monday the 24th to discuss Whittlesey's Phase 1 report. Based on that report, which we will have some access to ahead of time as a staff, I'm asking the staff to put together a draft action plan with action items for the city, with some indication as to expectation around when those items would be completed. So sort of a short, medium, and long-term action plan. I expect that document to be a living document that we will add to over time as other things come to light. I think Whittlesey is going to be working with us even beyond this first report, so they'll have additional things to say, and we'll have additional things that we will discover. But we will vote on that plan to adopt it, and it will be an expectation of the board. I hope, this is my proposal, that it be an expectation from the board to the city. Here are the action items that we expect to be taken care of in these timeframes, and should these things not happen, we have the full powers of the board to approve or not the budget, or to approve or not any contracts that come before us. So we're trying to time this, the approval of the FY24 budget, which we'll have to do by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, will be, at least for my part, my vote will be based on their compliance with the short-term action items that we're going to identify in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have an in-person meeting on the 24th to discuss this at length. We may have an executive session associated with that. So that's my thought. That's my plan. I hope that informs what we're going to be talking about as we talk about the city going forward. And I see Mr. Taylor has a question. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. White.
There was some material that suggested we were going to be voting on the West Haven budget at the May meeting. That seemed early to me.
The May meeting, we have a requirement to either approve or disapprove at the May meeting. Standard, we did this last year as well. We have a requirement to do that. So at the May meeting, we will make that decision.
Well, I mean,
as I recall, last year, we voted in May to disapprove. We gave them some guidance as to how they might get approval, and then in June, they ultimately got approved. I think that's probably true.
But this is different in that it's Tier 4. We have the ultimate decision, so
I think they were Tier 4 then, weren't they? Were they declared Tier 4 in April?
Yep. They were Tier 4 in May.
They were Tier 4 at that time. The
Anyway.
memo states.
Anyway.
Well, again, I'm just concerned that what are we, the 13th, whatever the date in the second week in May is, that you've got Winnesley, on the 24th,
Of April, we're gonna do
I
Whittle.
understand of April.
Yes.
Then we've got like 2 weeks to, well, I mean, we'll have a discussion here. I think we've got a lot of work to do because it is our budget. And last year, we may have been in tier 4, but I don't think we acted like it just because of the short time frame. That's not a criticism.
I believe it's the case that the default would be they would have to operate under their current budget. We wouldn't have to necessarily come up with an alternative budget. Is that correct?
I just want to see, I mean, obviously, we don't want to jam up the city, because they've got to get the mill rate and all those kinds
Sure.
of good things. But, again, I just think someone needs to think about the timetable, because I think we're behind the 8 ball.
Yep, it's gonna be tight. Yep.
More-
I'm hoping, well, my instructions to the staff were, for short-term action items, what could reasonably be accomplished by the end of the fiscal year in time for us to make some kind of judgment?
Yeah, I think it may be that, and maybe David can address this, is one of the key things that we have to lock in is the mill rate, which I think we'll talk about a little bit.
Okay. So that's the thought. Just to set the tone. If there are other questions about that plan of action, we're going to be meeting in a special meeting on Whittlesey and the action plan on the 24th. That's the earliest Whittlesey was going to be available to do that for us, so that's why we had to bifurcate the work this month. But if there are no further questions or comments about that, we'll move on to review and discussion of the Board of Ed's recommended budget. We have, let's see, the Board of Ed budget was reviewed by the subcommittee. Members requested that the budget be presented today. Let's see here. Board of Ed is on break. Superintendent is not available. OPM staff will provide a summary of the budget. If the board members have questions, we will contact the BOE for feedback.
I do, I see. Matt, if you're here, and I know that you reached out to let me know that the superintendent wasn't available today, and that you're on vacation and taking this meeting, so I appreciate it. I was going to provide a summary of the budget. I had already pulled that together, unless you feel otherwise.
Sure. I mean, if you want to provide your summary that you already put together, I can answer the questions that are available.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick summary, that's all.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
Okay. So from the superintendent's budget, the budget is $89 million. It's a flat funded budget for fiscal year '24. And within that budget, if you wanted to see the details of the flat funded budget, it is located on page 19 of the, and it'll give you all of the categories with the dollars that are pretty much showing flat within tuition, salaries, operational plant benefits, purchase of services, and instructional support. But in addition to that, there is a need for the student population that they still have to have an increase. So the $89 million is the support that comes from the city, and the Board of Education is asking for an increase of $1.5 million as it's needed to continue to services as they are. The Board of Ed will be relying on an increase in the amount of $959,000 from the Alliance, and that has been a historical increase, and it is pending, of course, the governor's approved budget. And in addition to that amount, the other offset would be the remaining ESSER fund, green fund of $625K will be used to offset the teacher's salary. ESSER 2 will expire on September 30th, and those salaries will be shifted to ESSER 3. And in addition to that, the budget provides some drivers and some assumptions on page 13, where the union contract increases for teachers, nurses, and para at 2% increase. Admin and ASME step increases are included, and there is a breakdown of the positions on page 27 within the budget. In addition, they're expecting to have some increases within contractual obligations, such as busing contracts, and increases within benefits of, $720K, and that is due to the, state partnership plan with a 6% increase. And, special education tuition of $250,000 increase, transportation of $236,000 increase, and electricity of $100,000. That's the overview, for the budget.
Mr. Cavallero, I heard mention made of salaries being picked up by expiring federal funds. What's the long-term plan for that?
So starting in fiscal year 25, in the 5-year plan, the city is slated to increase our budget year after year after year. So by finally receiving some local increases, we feel we'll be able to pick up those salaries and the expiring grants, shift them over to our operating budget, as well as hopefully continued increases within the Alliance grant.
Okay. Questions of the board for the Board of Ed, their recommended budget?
I do have some questions.
Ms. Kennison has questions about her own summary.
I did review it. I have some questions as far as the, are you planning to give us some transfers for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23? When I looked at the budget summary, if you look at the actual versus a comparison to where the budget is, it looks like some of those numbers are higher. So if the actuals were higher when you're looking at the budget, it does make me wonder if the budget was short, and or maybe when this budget was put together in January, that transfers had to happen that were covered by grants.
The budget is not short. Our transfers were given to our Board of Ed last meeting. They approved them, and they will be submitted to for the April subcommittee meeting for review.
Thank you. Also, is it possible for you to give us a breakdown of enrollment so that we can, I think we're hearing this from the superintendent at the subcommittee that there has been a decline in enrollment, and I did not see in the package any kind of analysis that showed us the enrollment decline. If you could do that, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. We do have some declining enrollment, especially at like the elementary levels. With our new high school, that enrollment continues to increase. Actually, it was built for 1,500 students. We're up to 1,800 currently. Although our enrollment as a whole is declining, the special needs populations, EL, special education, those numbers are continuing to grow steadily. At this point, our EL students represent 20% of our total population, and our special ed students equal another 20% of our total population. So although the numbers may be going down, the needs and requirements are becoming greater. But I will have a breakdown for you for the subcommittee meeting as well.
Thank you very much. That would be helpful for us to have that. Did you also have a breakdown on special education and the enrollment numbers and the trends in that area? And if your services are being handled inside district or outside district, those costs and maybe the location.
Sure, absolutely, not a problem.
Perfect. And in addition to busing, because I see that you have an increase there, so I think it would be helpful for us to see a trend on that.
So that contract is expiring June 30th. We hope to have it out to bid next week. That increase is a potential placeholder if the contract were to have an increase in when after the bids come back.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Kansas?
No.
I see Mr. Waxenberg has his hand up.
Just that, if you recall, I requested the amount of staff in each area and the vacancies, similar to what we have for the other districts. If you could get that to us before the next subcommittee meeting, that's fine.
Yes.
because the issue is obviously, especially in the Board of Ed side, carrying vacancies. Obviously you're budgeting for them. Do you budget insurance for those positions as well?
Yes,
And they're budgeted, I assume, at the family rather than at single, I would think,
yes,
conservatively.
yes.
The only reason I say that is similar to what Hartford did. You look historically as to vacancies you've been carrying from year to year, and eventually you can say, is this vacancy ever going to be filled within this budget year based on the history? I don't, on the town side, it's a little bit different because the budget's been flat funded for so long. But it's an issue that is of concern because obviously we know the salary account more than likely will show a surplus because those vacancies will carry throughout the school year. At least historically, they do in a lot of districts. I would think West Haven's no different. So then the question is, what do we do long term? That's another discussion, but the whole issue I'm getting at is vacancies, total amounts of budget, and to see where that lies in relationship to the possibility of having funds available in other areas based on the historical nature of vacancies not being filled.
Absolutely. That will be ready for the subcommittee as well.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Sorry, yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, Matt, can you give us, this is really a follow-up to Secretary Beckham's question in terms of the amount of money, total number of positions that are currently budgeted in next year's budget, or your proposed budget for next year, that are funded out of the ESSER 3 grant. We know the ESSER 3 grant's going away, so that we can get an understanding of what the total exposure there is that you're expecting will have to come back to the city funded budget or some other grant, if there is some other grant available.
Okay, I will put that together for the subcommittee as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for the board? All right, we'll move on to the mayor's proposed budget and 5-year plan. Proposed budget and 5-year plan were reviewed and discussed at the subcommittee meeting. A list of follow-up requests from that meeting was developed by our staff. The full board now has an opportunity to review and provide feedback to the city on the proposed budget and 5-year plan. They provided a monthly cash flow analysis of interest income for the 5-year plan per the request of the subcommittee. And the city is here, Mr. Taylor and Ms. O'Connor, to provide an overview and answer any questions. Over to you, sir. Unless
I just wanted to thank them for coming here today in person, and appreciate David for making that effort and joining the team.
Thanks. As you mentioned, the budget was presented back on March 16th to our city council and delivered to this board around the same time. On April 3rd, we had our public hearing, our initial public hearing, and the hearings continued. Over the last week, we had 2 nights of hearings, and we have scheduled hearings for about 4 more nights over the next couple of weeks, and then tentative hearings that will stretch to make. Council has, by charter, the obligation to pass the budget on or before the next. So that's kind of where we are as a city. Got the 5-year plan, got the budget. I'd like to use some comments.
I would like. Yes, please.
So the recommended budget includes an investment in people. I'm sorry.
Your turn, Micah.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Our budget includes an investment in people, a net of 11 people added, increases in public safety, health, fiscal controls. We are, as recommended by this board, recommended by me, we are increasing our staff to create some segregation duties, to create some opportunities for review,
strengthen our business controls. And there's some quality of life for the citizenry in there, as well as some revenue generation. We do have a reduction in debt service, bonding every year for projects. The mill rate increases in the 5-year plan are in line with what we presented last year. And the increased general fund as a percent of total expenditures will go from 5%, projected at the end of FY '23, to over 7% in FY '24. So far as the 5-year plan is concerned, our goals are still the same. As we talked about previously, we want to build the general fund balance to what is recommended by the GFOA, so far as the level of percent of expenses. Enhance fiscal control and accountability. The way of talking about accomplishments, we did implement lock-in means to prevent people from issuing TOs that would overspend their budget. Just recently, we announced a no TO, no pay policy, and basically had a meeting with the mayor of all our department heads to announce that we will use the purchase order system if we use it correctly. And otherwise, your vendors will have the risk of not being paid. So using the system is the method for extending our contract to our vendors. So that will be strongly adhered to, strongly controlled by the purchasing manager. The other thing we've done is we have made some strategic hires in human resources. We also, earlier in the year, I think we mentioned to this body that we did move the payroll processing function out of HR, put it in finance. And now we've hired an HR professional who will take on the onboarding, changing of salaries, benefits, those type of things, effectively meeting a many years old audit note that we didn't have those to be segregated. And for one, I'm very glad to that we will have that. So the other thing that we're doing now, we're working with the union right now to post a budget coordinator position, which will enhance our controls. We're working with department heads to manage their budget, come up with more timely budget transfers as needed, and overall increase our budget progress. And then we are serious about mitigating increased costs and finding new opportunities for revenue. 5-year plan does reflect an effort at parking monetization, and it anticipates our beach parking being monetized, and 2 streets that are typically covered with cars around our VA hospital. These are not for veterans. These are people who work at the VA hospital taking up all the street parking. We're going to do there as per the council on Monday night. So there are a lot of assumptions in the 5-year plan. I'm going to assume that you have that. We do have on page 6 of the 5-year plan assumptions, there are a lot of other projects listed intended to increase fees, reduce expenditures, and increase grant funding. The other thing is there's a new goal, as I was not aware, unfortunately, coming into this role, that we were so poorly funded in our internal service funds. It was brought out in the audit report, and that's when I was made aware of it. Unfortunately, I did not have that information when I initially pulled the budget together, but working with city council, so we now have a 3-way goal for any surplus we might have. Fund not only the general fund, but those internal service funds. So that's a bit of a challenge. Another challenge that we have is that our police and fire department pensions lost about $20 million in FY '22. This means that we have a larger unfunded balance
contributions at the city to those plans are going up. For the police department, there's an increase of $6 million over the remaining 4 years of the fire department. Inflation, as projected last time, was 2%, is now 2.3%. So that's another headwind that we're facing. And then again, as mentioned earlier, on an average, we will be funding the Board of Education an additional $1.5 million every year starting in 2025. So far as, and Mr. White, thank you for mentioning that we do have a challenge of getting the bill right sometime in before June is over, so that we can publish our tax bills in time. And that is, there is an increase of from 34 mils this year to 34.97. Due to the challenges, our 5-year plan does not project a fund balance as a percent of expenses that was as high as last time we talked about 5-year plans, but we are looking to be to 7.5% roughly at FY28. And our goal of reaching 12 to 15%, which was our stated goal last time, by 2031, I am now looking at 2033. So any questions you might have or suggestions?
Questions from the board, Mr. White?
Yes, a number. Thank you very much. I've spent time on the 5-year plan because I think that if we know where we're going, then you can kind of fill in a little more thoughtfully. And I do appreciate your putting a stake in the ground on where you want fund balance to be, where you want internal service fund to be. So that's very helpful. That said, since we are on a short timetable, I'm going to give you some responses on what I think needs to be changed. Overall expenses have to go down even more than here. And I would like this board to talk about the mill rate. I believe that when you combine the fire and city, that you're in the upper tier of cities. If there's a benchmark that we can look at for different things, I'd appreciate it. What is, you had one GF, something, or GFOA? What is that?
That's the governmental finance organization.
For municipal? Okay.
Any government, yes.
Where do I find the internal fund, the internal service fund payments over 5 years? I thought I'd seen it, then I lost it. It was too much.
I apologize. So it would be in, I thought I highlighted it in green.
You did, yeah.
We probably should.
The Montessori method.
Near the end of the package. Okay, so here on, if you look, page, gosh, my version is not updated, I'm so sorry. But if you look at the last page of expenditure, go back one page, and then the second page, where you see city insurance retention near the bottom of the page. I apologize for those.
No. This is on where, 5-year plan?
In the 5-year plan, yes. In the expenditure detail, you can see 1800981 city insurance retention.
So it's under the, what's the heading?
City insurance retention.
City.
What are you seeing on your page?
I've got operating charges, summary of operating charges, insurance, pension hospitalization.
Okay, I think you're on the summary page, you need to
Yes.
page back.
Page back.
Yeah, go back, go forward, I guess, deeper into the report. So there's a couple of things you can look for, and there should be a green highlight, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I don't have any.
Dave, are you referring to the detailed page?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't have a page number.
It's okay. Are you referring to the details pages?
Yes,
You are.
yes, there's expenditure detail, should be on the heading of the page.
So it has each one of the departments with all of the detail underneath it at the bottom.
Is this what's in our package, what was given to the subcommittee?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, exactly the same, okay.
So it looks like this. So here's where I was talking about city insurance retention. See the highlight here?
Yeah.
That's one of them, and I'll,
Okay, and where is that?
so you see this shading?
Yeah.
That is straight.
General liability fund balance, okay.
Okay, and then on this page. What that page is.
Okay. Well, I just give general, I don't want to hold up people to this, thank you very much.
There's another line.
But there are,
Current service.
yeah, there are two things. One is you benchmarked, that you wanted to go to 1-to-1, which was the recommended place over 15 years.
Yes.
I strongly believe that should be shortened dramatically. I don't know what the rest of the board says, but just so you know, that ought to go. The fund balance ought to be much more aggressive. I know that in the past, we have kind of accepted, where you wanted to go. I think because this is tier 4, I think we need to push a little more. So I'd be looking for fund balance, maybe 12% after 5 years, 10%, I don't know, but somewhere in there. The OPEB, I couldn't find that, I don't want to spend time doing that, but the OPEB trust needs to be funded at a higher rate, in my view.
Mr. White, the OPEB trust, where we had previously said we do $150,000 a year, we've increased that to $250,000.
Right, again, I don't know what the benchmark should be, where do you get to that part? Because 250 may be, not enough. And I'd like some guidance as to, where it is, because a lot of the spending has been funded by kicking the can down the road on the internal service fund, very slow growth on, the general fund. A lot of it, quite frankly, is more money. So, there has been some progress in the last few years, and I recognize that. But I think we're into, let's get into high gear. The parks program, I noticed in the letter, what is that ongoing or what? It just seems to me, and I'll tell you where it is, that I think new programs, even for something as desirable as parks, is not appropriate for where you are. New expenditures, just, that sounds like a nice to have. And then tell me, push back where.
I believe you're referring to the ARPA parks.
Well, there was an ARPA thing, but you're saying now that there's a parks program. Is that ARPA funds or your plans?
I'm sorry, I'm at a loss to know what I said. Was that in my preamble?
It was in the mayor's letter to the council.
Oh, yes, those are ARPA funding.
So there's no new funding. Okay, what about, are those permanent positions? In other words, will the position go away when ARPA goes away?
They're not position driven. The parks programs are labor, contracted labor.
Contracted labor.
As well as, materials.
And that'll have a finite, when ARPA funds are gone, contract labor is gone.
That's correct. We
Okay.
don't further need,
Okay.
other than maintenance.
Okay. I noticed that again, you don't have the case notes, but, there is a workers' comp fund balance adjustment in, 25, 27.
That's another one of the internal service funds that we're looking to increase. So
there was an adjustment though, about a six-figure adjustment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's our funding, that fund balance. Workers' comp is one of the internal service funds that we're on the fund.
So they're gonna be funded lump sum in 2 years, in 2 different years, not spread out?
Let me, before I say more things in there, let me take a quick look at this.
Yeah, I'm looking at the last page.
Yes, I have it.
I got fund balance adjustment,
$2.2 million to the work over the 5-year plan. The workers' comp was the one that was even more grossly underfunded than the others. And so I wanted to put more in there, and it will take large numbers like that to get there.
but there's, okay, so just for me to see that I've got fund balance adjustment, West Haven Police, there's 2 sums. Fund balance adjustment, ABC assigned, what's that? It's 500 this year, 500 this year.
That's the ADAT. I can't.
Okay, and then COVID assignment,
That was in this year's budget. It does not exist.
okay, and then fund balance adjustment, 1.8 in this year, and then another 1.4 roughly.
Yeah, that is, if you will, our budgeted surplus, our intention to increase our fund balance. Without that line, we don't have an increase in fund balance and a balanced budget.
So, but again, I guess I don't understand how you can have fund balance if you're paying an obligation with the fund balance.
Now, this is purely a budgeted surplus.
So it's a budgeted surplus and you're going to assign it. Now, the workers' comp adjustment is funded plus, or is this, if we get a surplus, it'll be funded?
No, the workers' comp adjustment is the adjustment to general liability insurance, our plan expenses.
Okay, this would be extra.
This is our attempt to raise our fund balance as a percent of expenses, as we were just talking about, and over the period.
Okay, I can find out from someone later, but the notion of having a fund balance and spending it.
These do not represent checks.
Consider it a placeholder, like a different department that you would.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the other is, I think, and I noticed the Marb repayment is kind of back-ended. You got about half of it in the last 2 years. I kind of like to smooth that out, just sort of, let's get that out of the way. Obviously, not to exceed what we've spent.
I've yet to see him with.
Yeah, no, whatever that may be, I suspect Withersley's gonna send a nice bill. So anyway, that's, in addition, I'm gonna be listening to Withersley to see, you know, what they found where we can do that. I mean, this is my concern about Tier 4 is, we may have some ideas, but at the same time, we don't wanna jeopardize, I don't wanna jeopardize, you know, safety or other things. I don't know if we have a bigger contingency, and in the event we chop too hard, and maybe the financial manager can authorize the use of that contingency to put something we made. We don't want the city to be hurt, but I think it's time to get these expenses under control. And if there's any way to benchmark any of these expenses against others, it would be good, because you've got a high tax rate for a reason. And I'm not sure, as I sit here today, I know why.
So our tax rate is 49 in the state municipalities.
When you add the.
When I add the fire department,
So you're 49?
when I add fire department, we're 7.
We're set.
Yeah. But it's very difficult. I've been doing some work over the last month to try to identify benchmarks with fire departments and municipalities. And even looking a little closer at the ones that are right around us. We're in the middle of our surrounding neighbors, so far as our mill rate. Municipalities have different ways of funding the fire department, unfortunately. Some fire department budgets reflect no salaries. So there's no unified way to present, this is what our firehouse costs. I asked, the CCM for some comparative data, and nothing compares. Everyone has a different way of taxing, a different way of funding, and it's very difficult for me to draw conclusions. And so that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. One final question, if I may, of Ms. O'Connor. Judge, the council is part of this. We're looking at changing things, and I appreciate your being here, for your attendance here. It is, I know you can't speak for the council, certainly not at this point, but are there things people in the council, some people in the council, are looking at in this budget and said maybe we can do a little less?
Yes, we are. We're all very concerned that 0.97 is almost the whole mill rate, and we don't want to see the people incur any more costs. So we are going to look very closely at it once we finish with the budget hearing to see where we can cut so that we can bring that down.
I think that, everyone wants to cut taxes, but paying budgets reflect values, and if you want to cut taxes, then you've got to give up something else. And it's easy to talk about that. Let's give up, let's go easy with the taxes, and we'll deal with the other stuff.
But we know that we have to tighten our belt. We know that there is some waste in the budget that we can definitely get rid of, and we do plan on taking this very seriously.
Okay, could you share any of those things now, so as we talk about it, areas without getting into detail or saying that?
I can't think of any areas right now that everyone is all in agreement. I'm not willing to speak for the whole council yet. I'm one of 3 Republicans. And so a lot of the caucusing does happen with Democrats, and we're not privy to that.
Okay, but in terms of the people you speak with, where would you say, again, not speaking for the whole council, but where would you suggest we look for savings based on your conversations?
I'm not sure at this moment. 11 positions at first, when you hear it, seems very excessive. But then when you look at the problem that West Haven is in, 11 positions to help split the work up and do things correctly really isn't that many. And that was the first thing we were going to look at, but it seems as we go through the process, we need them more and more.
No, I think that those positions were on the list that we kept asking about action item, when are you going to do it? You've done it, those are sacrosanct as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, yeah, talk to me.
Mr. Waxenberg, you have your hand up?
Yes, couple questions. The increase in staffing is significant, obviously, from 310 to 321. Last year it was 297. This year went to 310, then 321. So you've had a significant increase. How many vacancies are you carrying right now at the city, on the city side? I know that you give us some numbers, but I guess what I'm looking for before I can vote for any budget is I need to know what, again, it's not just addition. If you've got a situation where you're carrying a vacancy for a period of time and you're operating within that vacancy, but carrying those vacancies, and now you want to add personnel. I need to know for what purpose. Public Works is increasing its staffing from 4 to 8, 50%, 2 of which are administrative assistants. You know, it's always nice to add staff. The question that I've always had is, if you don't add them, what happens? What does the taxpayer lose? By having the personnel, what does the taxpayer gain? And you know, just to say, well, we need an administrative assistant, especially in your situation, one has to question why. I, like Mr. White and probably other members of the Marb, am concerned about the 5-year plan where your combined mill rate's going to be close to 55, not counting the motor vehicle, which is maxed out between the town and the fire department. So it's kind of like, we need this money. Let's just increase the mill rate. When you haven't, when maybe our financial person will be able to do it, a complete evaluation of what's existing now and what recommendations do you make for eliminations of position, for combining positions, for doing a whole host of things. So as it stands now, I'm having a difficult time looking at this budget because all it does is add 11 people. In the police department, you're adding a captain and something else. But if you look at the police commissioners' meetings, they say they're staffed at 110, but the commissioner says if they had to go to war tomorrow, they'd only have 93 people. So, and lastly, it's the whole issue of the volunteer fire department. I don't even understand how you operate. You're the only town that operates in such a fashion. Firehouses all over the place, volunteer firemen all over the place. Additional firefighters coming up, but they're independent, so there's not a heck of a lot you can do about that except for Allentown. And I, to this day, don't understand the relationship you have with Allentown, but it's concerning. It's concerning that it's just well, we took action. Your staffing level went from 297 to 290. That was in 2020. Now, 4 years later, you're going back to 321. That's over a 10% increase in staffing on the city side. I guess I need to know why. You know, what are you going to restore that's been missing? So it's just a frustration of trying to assess where there is monies to be even $50,000 here or there, monies to be gathered to offset some of these quote unquote needs that the council feels are necessary for the taxpayers. That's fine. But like I said, it's not only addition. So I look forward to an assessment of vacant positions. How long have they been vacant? And in a staffing chart. I know you have a staffing chart. I just don't know how many positions are vacant.
Yep.
Before we move on, I just want to make everybody aware that from the subcommittee, all of the requests that have come forward, we do have a list, and it was a handout for today, of all of the requests that came out of the sub. We just didn't have an opportunity to get that back out to everybody, but we do plan to do that and get that to the members as well as to the city so that they're aware of what our requests were from sub, and we'll take and compile from today's requests in addition to that, okay?
Great. Mr. Falsigno.
Good morning again, everybody. I apologize for the deepness of my voice, a little under the weather, but I have a bunch of questions and concerns. You know, we've been talking about this, the pensions. You know, you said that that's one of your headwinds coming up. We've been talking about the pensions for the fire departments since the day I started. I don't know what you can do about it, who can do something about it, but you need to consolidate the people that run your pensions, because there's a drastic difference between the profitability, for lack of a better term, of some of the other of the central and the west shores as opposed to the Allentown. So if I lived in Allentown, which I don't, I am paying a total of 53 mills according to your fiscal 28 forecast. So as you extrapolate that out, you're talking about a district that has to pay a 5% premium for living there. That I think is unreasonable. I also look at your grand list and your total revenues, and I understand that they're forecasts. I just don't understand how you go or how you consider going from some of the revenue levels that you're talking about from where you're at right now. I don't understand how you get there because you have these huge jumps in forecasted years. And I think you have to really look at some of the, the motor vehicles, for instance. You go from an actual in 2022 from 287 to a budgeted year in 23 of 367, and you're forecasting 367. Then you jump up to 398. You're talking about 100. You're talking a huge jump in your motor vehicles. Your real estate, the same thing. As you raise, at least it's always been my thought process, that as you raise mill rates, sometimes you lose some of the people that want to live there. Some of them just can't afford it. And I think you're really teetering at that level where I would hate to see you go up so high on your mill rate that you start pushing people out of town. The other thing I look at is some of the ARPA funds and the way they're being spent. I'm all for having artificial turf at your West Haven High School and some of the other, your soccer field and your, girls softball field. I think that's just great. But is that the best use of using most of those ARPA funds? And what happens when the ARPA funds disappear, which they will? There is a maintenance level on all these things that you're doing with the ARPA funds that is going to that will extend further out into your 5-year fiscal plan. I think you have to recognize that, and I think you have to have an honest look in the mirror with some of these things and realize that some of them are very, very nice to have, but maybe you're just not in a position under this budget to do that. So these are just some of the things that I look at and some suggestions that I'm making. I do think you have a better handle on it in the last month or so than you had 3 or 4 months. So I'll compliment you on that. But I think you have to, at some point going forward, and come back to the Marb with something I think that's going to be much more, in my view, realistic and something that's much more favorable for the people that live in your town.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any comment? Any questions? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Taylor. Any response?
I didn't have your question.
Okay, all right. Well, he did put a lot in there. He gave you some advice about how to
Yeah,
get your vote.
there wasn't a question there. It was just my
Okay.
view of some of the numbers that I looked at.
Thank you. Mr. Hamilton?
Sure. I have a little different perspective, I think, than some of my fellow board members. And I want to kind of address the issue of the mill rate first in West Haven. There's no doubt West Haven has one of the highest municipal mill rates in the state. It's not the highest, but for 30 years, it's always been up in the top 10 or 20 mill rates in the state. And the reason for that is not because the city spends so much more money than other municipalities. The reason for that is that West Haven's grand list is comparatively small in comparison to the grand lists of other municipalities. I mean, if you look at the sort of the other extreme, if you will, in Connecticut, is Greenwich has one of the lowest effective mill rates in the state, down at something like 0.7% or 0.5% of the property value in that municipality. But Greenwich has an assessed value of something like $1.3 or $1.5 million per person. West Haven's, I think, per capita assessed value is down under $100,000 per person. So, that's really the reason why West Haven's mill rate is as high as it is. And long term, what can help bring it down, and it's never going to be down at Greenwich's level, but what can bring it down is growth and development and property, growth, as well as potentially, sort of more dramatic changes to the way we tax and fund services in the state of Connecticut.
Amen.
But, absent those.
I'm just gonna put it in
things,
plug for regionalization and shared services and things like that.
Right, absolutely. I think those make some sense. So I'm, I sort of look at West Haven's situation and say, yes, it's unfortunate they've got a mill rate as high as they've got. On the other hand, West Haven's experience here has been, because of that high mill rate, they have a history of kind of cutting corners and not, funding some of the things that we know need to be funded in core areas like finance and HR to operate, with the kinds of internal controls and the kind of professionalism that's required to avoid, the unfortunate situations that have happened in West Haven. So, I look at it and I, say, although I would like to see a lower mill rate, more important to me is that the Marb is making sure that the budgets that are coming to us are balanced and accurate and honest budgets, number one. Number two, that they're budgets that are addressing those long-term liabilities, whether they be pension liabilities, OPEB liabilities, internal service funds that aren't properly funded. I want to see the city make progress on those areas in this budget and in, the next 5 years. And I want to see that the city has budgeted the staffing needed in order to ensure that we improve the level of internal controls in the city. And that's really important, I think. So I have a pretty different perspective than some of my board members. I think, the budget that you've proposed and the 5-year plan you proposed is moving in the right direction. I think there are some things that need to be tweaked. I think the issue of the internal service funds, I agree with Mr. White that those need to be shored up more quickly than your 5-year plan has provided. I'm concerned that the budget for next year, and for that matter, the budget for this year on workers' comp looks to me like it's not enough to cover your basic expenses, so in other words, it would suggest that you'd be going the wrong direction on your internal service funds over the next couple of years. So I think that needs to be addressed in the budget that ultimately the Marb adopts. I want to make sure that we're not going backwards on the internal service funds next year, and in fact are making at least some modest progress on them. And there's a few other things like that, but I do think, I applaud you for bringing us a 5-year plan at the same time you brought us a budget. I think that's, definitely a step in the right direction so that we can kind of look at these things in concert with each other. So those are, my thoughts at this time.
I could just add one thing.
Sure.
Not only is our rent low because our property values are low, they're occupied by low-income people. And so it really is a challenge. In fact, the rent is low-income people, and that is in large part. So it really is a challenge.
Mr. Balsigno, you had your hand up again? Although your screen has gone dark. All right, Mr. White in the room.
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate those comments. I think that's one of the nice things about having people with different backgrounds. But taking your point, I think we may be on the same page, I hope, in that expenses have to be cut. Maybe it's not to lower the tax rate, but they have to be cut. And I think now we've kind of said, okay, tweak this, tweak that. I don't want to use that word tweak anymore, because I think something more fundamental needs to be done. I think we agree on a few of the things that you gotta get back, but, you know, and I firmly believe that the 11 new positions are very much justified and can help going forward if there's a change in the culture, and the folks that are leading it, both the mayor and the council, are saying, yeah, that's the way it ought to be done. But when you have people taking pot shots, why are we doing it that way, and we've always done it this way? I mean, after 6 years of Marb oversight, why the hell are we still hearing that kind of crap? You know, that's what I want to see change. And I think we really need Wittisley to get into some of this stuff. I don't think I'm confident to say, you know, the DPW budget is too high, you can do it this way. You know, why aren't there mitigation measures on shared services? Things like that long term. Because when, you know, we eventually stop meeting like this, hopefully in my lifetime, that, you know, you're going to be in good shape, overcoming decades of neglect. And so I think, you know, the elections in November are going to be very important about who embraces this and who doesn't. And that's what the people of West Haven will decide. You know, they're going to get the government that they asked for. And our job is just to provide sunshine and let them know what's going on. And, you know, you decide. But I do think that one of the things people have talked about, and I agree with them, sort of little cubby holes where there are going to be automatic savings that will help you meet some goals. One is the way you and I think other, you know, calculate vacancies, you know, and budgets and all that kind of stuff. I've never had that position filled for the last 15 years. There it is in the budget. Oh, we got a savings. So, I mean, I think we've got to police that. I think one of the things I'm trying to work through is what's the difference between a conservative budget and one that's getting little cushions here and there, and I think we've got to make that judgment. For example, you have no grand list growth. You have no grand list growth other than mill rates for the most part. And you've got a reval October 24.
Yeah, I chose not to put.
No.
In there.
Okay, I mean, I think we ought to look at that. I understand the conservatism, but the question is that too conservative?
Two of the last three revaluations resulted in a reduction to the grant budget. Now, the most recent one was an increase, but two of the last three were reductions.
So again,
you kind of leave me like.
Just for the, well, yeah, you just clarify your crystal ball.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that's something for the Marb to talk about is, you know, what do you do with something like that? Dave said that, you know, there's a history here. At the same time, we know housing prices now are up. Let's see, you're going to say there's a small recession. But again, I just, so that the savings are real, and not just, you know, some kind of budgeting. So I don't know how we do that. I guess I'm depending a lot on Wittisley, because I feel more responsible for this budget, and as opposed to, you know, what do you know, send something back and we'll see if we like it. So anyway, just, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Other questions?
Just say it's never budgeted for vacancies, but, you know, I know Hartford mentioned that they do that, and yet the bill rate is 69. But it's more than twice ours. So, but it is a budgeting technique that we've never employed, and we could do that. I'm not adverse to it. It's just we show the positions of both parties. I'm not adverse to it, but
Ms. Kennison, quickly. Okay. Other questions on the proposed budget and 5-year plan? Obviously, this is the beginning of that discussion. We're going to be talking about this all spring, I believe. So we'll move on then to Tier 4 updates. A tentative special meeting will be scheduled in May for the Marb members to meet with the City Council in West Haven. And we will work out that date. I think that's under discussion. We've going to be public comment period during that meeting. Is there a discussion on an agenda for that? I understand the purpose or the idea was a chance for the council to speak to the board. And obviously the public will be there and we'll give them a chance to speak as well. It could be a long night, I don't know. Mr. White.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't just my opinion. I think you had something to do with it. I think one of the things I would be interested in is, I think we focus a lot on the mayor. I think we need to focus on the council as well, because they have a role in moving the city around. And I also am thinking about sunshine, transparency for the coming election. Some of the questions I would want to put to council members individually is, what do you see that, do you think West Haven has a problem? What is it? What would you do to fix it? I would certainly ask them about decisions that they've made. We've criticized the mayor in a number of things. From what I understand, the council went like that, so the car and all those things. So what are you thinking? You know, what can be done to change it? What do you think Marb is doing effectively? What do you think the Marb is not doing that they should do? And I think the final question is, going forward, are you willing to work with the Marb to get this in financial shape? Let the voters say. If people say, you know, the Marb is just a big group stepping on our throat, say it. And let people make a decision. But that's my thought, just as some.
All right, well, that's a preview of Mr. White's questions at the meeting. So as I understand, we're going to invite the city council to come. They're under no particular obligation to, but I would hope that they would all come. How many members on the commission, council?
13 of us. There's 10 district candidates, 10 district council people, and 3 at large.
Okay. Hopefully they'll all come when we get that settled, and there'll be a dialogue. Gosh, if they all give a 5-minute speech, though, that could be a while. I don't know. We'll play it by ear. We've never done this, but it's a chance for the city council to speak to us and vice versa in a public forum with the public present. I assume there'll be cameras, microphones, what have you. I'm sure the press will be there. So,
Public comment, I guess.
yes.
It will be a special meeting.
Yep.
In order to hold this.
Yep.
Therefore, whatever is needed to be on the agenda will not be on the agenda. We can't mediate.
Right. So we'll come out with an agenda that probably has city council members offering information. If the board wants to ask questions or make statements, they obviously can do so as well. And then we'll have a public comment period. Yes, sir.
I do think it ought to be clear to the public that, I think we had a speaker last time who said, you know, we ought to open the line so that people can talk about trash pickup or whatever is bothering them on, at West Haven, and they think the council is not, or the mayor is not responsible. That's not on our agenda, that's not us.
Right.
And so it's really got to be fiscal control, and that's got to be made clear, because you don't want to, you know, frustrate people needlessly. Just let them know up front.
Yep. Yep, it's about the Marbs, the reason why the city is before the Marb, which is perceived lack of financial controls and governance gaps that need to be filled to get rid of the risk to the city's financial position that poses. Mr. Falsigno, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I forgot to take it down. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Other comments about the proposed meeting with the council sometime in May? All right, I'll let the staff update us on the RFP for the financial manager.
Thank you. I'm happy to say about the progress that we've made since I last reported out on it to the Marb, and that we have completed the subcommittee or the evaluation committee has we pulled together together all of the ratings, and from that, we decided to start to check references on one of the proposers who is the top proposer that was actually rated amongst us. And then we have then done reference checks, and those reference checks have all come back favorable. And at this point, I believe the next steps are going to be for me to follow up with the business office and legal at OPM to find out the next step of the actual contract. I'm not going to reveal until I have permission to be able to do so.
Okay. Questions of the staff about the RFP for the finance manager? We have yes, sir.
Yeah, when is that person scheduled to be on board roughly?
We haven't negotiated a contract yet.
I understand that, but
What's the plan?
So, where are we?
end of May?
It would be nice if we can get through a contract by the end of time.
There's no, I mean, I was just looking at the Marb guidelines and stuff like that, and the finances, one of the roles of financial manager is to help us ask the questions that we've been posing today. So, next year we'll have that person, but, we're not gonna have it this year. And hopefully with this week.
I look forward to that person being on site.
Then what?
I look forward to that person being on site, and the vacancies in my department. I find it very difficult to keep up with it. I apologize for the slowness of the document. We have meetings. That would be very helpful.
Okay, if no other questions or comments about that item, we'll move on to the monthly financial report. And Mr. Taylor, I assume, can take us through that.
Sure. It's been provided in your packet. You should get a first chance to look at it. In summation, the updated forecast is indicating a 2.1. The updated forecast is in the 5-year plan. You're not going to see it. I had no time to forecast it again after that. So you have a pretty detailed forecast in the 5-year plan. That indicates a surplus of $2.3 billion on slightly net favorable revenues. There are some ups and downs, and lower expenditures. Most of the expenditure savings is the delay in our bonding that was forecast earlier in the year, which will not happen until September, pending review approval. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that I can not only increase the general fund at the end of this year, but also increase some general service funds, using this money, spreading it around a little bit. Now, just realize that increasing an internal service fund instead of the general fund puts our expenses versus funds at a lower percentage. So, unfortunately, there's sort of a catch-22 to do. So far as the results, we're 2/3 of the way through the fiscal year. We have received 81.5% of the budget. The city announced in the past month that we're going to start putting boots on vehicles, and amazingly, tax receipts have gone up, and so I expect that they'll be catching up into the 90s before long, and then everything will go out for lien very shortly, and that will also drive things. We continue to show very favorable investment income, again, maximizing the interest-bearing accounts on a daily basis, and look at the cash flow. The reason I could give you your monthly cash flow that you asked for is because it's just an expansion of the document that I I will say that I've noted in here that from the $65 million that we had in the state investment fund, it was down to 51 as of the end of this period. It was down 40 today. That was out there yesterday to cover it, but it's not unexpected, that everything's in and all the taxes are in and the investment. So it's time to spend money. So that's what's going on there. I will say that there's potential for additional mention on expenditures. I have a draft provided from a consultant that I was able to hire for purposes of the budget, since it's no longer in the expense category as of last week. But one of the last things I actually did was prepare me a draft of what our transfers ought to be. I know council will be coming up into that very shortly. I haven't had a chance to review it, but once I do, it'll happen. It'll happen with the budget. Yeah, I think that was all that I had so far as the overview. If there's any questions?
Questions for the city on their monthly financials? Okay, I don't see anything on the screen. We will then move ahead to review, discussion, possible action on some non-labor contracts. These would require action today, approval to go forward, these contracts. Question to staff? Okay, then, and can you answer questions about these?
I will do my best.
Okay.
I had mentioned that we can get Steve Tiernan either on the line
Okay.
or here. He is in Hartford today.
Is Mr. Tiernan, oh, he's not on the line? Mr. Tiernan's not available? All right, well, let's just start. So the first one is Layden Industries LLC, the Beach Street Roadway Improvements Phase 2. Contract between the city and Layden Industries LLC for the construction of Beach Street Road improvements for approximately $4.8 million, the term of 240 calendar days. This contract was reviewed, discussed, and recommended to the full Marb for approval by the subcommittee. Questions about this contract? Seems self-explanatory. I don't see any questions on screen or in the room. Do people want to approve this one?
I will.
Mr. Hamilton moves approval of the contract.
with Layden Industries.
I'll second it.
That's Mr. Falsigno for a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Contract approved. Next contract is with Northwest Hills Automotive LLC, purchase of 2 fire chief vehicles. Allentown Fire Department requested a purchase of 2 fire chief vehicles. Do they have 2 fire chiefs?
We have a deputy chief.
I see. For a total of $100,636. This was a state contract for the purchase of cars and light-duty trucks that was used, and the dealer is on the state vendor list. So this is the DAS-maintained list of vetted vendors that the state uses. Any discussion about the trucks for the fire department? Vehicles, are they trucks?
Yes, they are.
Okay,
Chevy Tahoes.
all righty then. Each about 50,000.
That's correct. With the upgrades necessary to be a fire.
I see.
That's
Okay.
That's why they're over, otherwise we could have bought them cheaper. We can still be here if we need to.
I see. I know I've lived a long time when anything made by Chevy costs $50,000. Just saying.
I think it's,
I felt the same way about the Ford Bronco, but anyway.
So as a comment, reaching back to our grand list, and this is a testament to why our grand list for vehicles has gone up.
I see.
Vehicles are more expensive.
Yep. Mr. Falsigno, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. How old are the 2 trucks that you're getting rid of? I assume you're displacing 2 other vehicles, right?
That is correct. I believe that the chief is on the line. I do not recall.
Is the fire chief on the line? Is that Chief
Good
Terenzio?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. The vehicles are 10 years old and are averaging over 80,000 miles at this point in time. They were part of a vehicle replacement plan that we developed back in 21, and they're fitting into that criteria that we are trying to meet at this point. And one vehicle will be kept and relegated down to use by the deputy fire marshal, who is currently driving a 2012 old retired police car, and will be used as a backup vehicle. The other one that has more mileage on it, but will get probably more money, on the open market will be traded in to help defray the cost.
Remind me how many firefighters are in Allentown again?
In Allentown, we have 20 staff and myself in the administration and a deputy chief / fire marshal who wears 2 hats.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Waxenberg.
Yeah, who pays for this?
This will be coming out of our this current budget that has money been allocated for it, and that would be the 22-23 fiscal budget. That's paid for by the people in Allentown.
Okay, so it's on the Allentown budget side.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions about the fire trucks? Do we want to make a motion to approve the fire trucks? Going
So
once.
moved.
Mr. Waxenberg moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Comer seconds. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Contract's approved. The next contract is Columbus House, Inc., the 2022 Housing Crisis Response Program. Contract between the city and Columbus House to render homeless outreach case management service. Contract amount is $149,500 using ARPA funds. The term of the contract expires at the end of the year 24. Questions about the Housing Crisis Response Program contract? Mr. Waxenberg, Mr. Falsigno, is that your hand up or? Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, is this a new program or is this a continuation of an existing program?
With the, out of the ARPA funds, one of the stipulations was to use it to, in this sort of fashion. So the ARPA committee provided a plan to the council approved the plan, spent $354,000 to help the housing crisis, homeless, others who are immediately, for whatever reason, become in a housing situation, whether it's a degradation of the property, et cetera. And we did out a contract to not have to staff up for something like this. And Columbus House is the regional placement.
Thank you. So that was going to be one of my second questions was, did you go through any sort of RFP process? And it sounds like you did.
Yes, there was a bid posted on December 8th, closed on December 22nd. Columbus House was the only respondent, not unexpected, because these places have sort of monopolized their regions.
Right, but so I guess I still didn't quite understand your first answer, whether or not this is, had you done this before with previous grant funds or some other source of funding, or is this a first-time effort?
We have not done anything similar to this. However, we've partnered with Columbus House in the past. They do get some CDA funds, and they have rehoused. I want to say it's 35 members of West Haven that they take care of, and they help them make rent payments and everything. So they are a big presence in West Haven.
Okay, and I guess the last, and I'm in support of it. I'm just got a few concerns, but whether, for instance, what happens next year when the ESSER money or the ARPA money is gone, assuming this is successful, which I hope it is, it sounds like it's an important initiative. Is this something you anticipate you're going to try to fit it into your local budget, or is there other grant funding that you think might be available to continue it in the future? Or is this something that you think after 1 year it's you've solved the problem, which I think would be unlikely, but wonderful if it were the case.
conservative to say we've solved the problem in 2 years. But no, this is a, it's a I think it's a 2-year contract. I think the second, oh, 20. Yeah. So, that's something that, council, those that work in CDA and others will have to consider as we go forward. It's not reflected in the 5-year plan at this time. And to say that homelessness will be solved by the end of 2024.
Well, I mean, I'm supported, I'm gonna vote in favor of it, I just,
Yeah.
it's those issues.
If we can give people a leg up at this time, we just think it's correct.
Other questions on the Columbus House contract? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Mr. White moves approval.
Second.
I'm going to give that one to Mr. Falsigno as the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries, contract's approved. Next item is Tilcon Connecticut Inc. paving service for several streets. Tilcon Connecticut Inc. will be hired as the contractor to provide paving service under another DAS state contract, built bituminous concrete materials and bridge deck membrane waterproofing contract. That's a mouthful. The quotation received from Tilcon for the service is $1,507,227. Questions on the paving contract? No questions? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Falsigno moves the paving contract.
I'll second.
Mr. Hamilton seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? The ayes have it, the contract's approved. Next item on our agenda is review and discussion of contracts over $50,000 not approved by the Marb. This was an item discussed by the subcommittee. Subcommittee requested the city to provide written approval process and backup documentation supporting the contracts on the list provided in the meeting materials. We have an item here for the process for approval of contracts. Is there discussion around that? Ms. Kinnis, I'm looking at you.
From the follow-up of the subcommittee, I want to let you know that we do not have a complete package today. So it would just be bringing to the attention of the contracts that are going to be coming forth with the details. So at this moment, this is the list of the contracts, but we can then decide, and I don't have a process of what the existing process is. And this is, keep in mind, this is happening in the past. This is prior to Mr. Taylor coming on as the finance director. I would then ask that what is the process today?
Mr. Taylor, do you have a response?
Yes, in fact, I think just as a document, I forwarded
You did,
this
yes,
document
I
late last
they
night.
don't have it, they
We
don't
don't
have
have it. But what this document basically does is if you want to get into a contract, you need to start using this. There's a place for the finance director to sign, the purchasing director. There's a spot that indicates that the Marb review has occurred.
Is that you and Mr. Spryer?
That's me and Mr. Spryer.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, and from that point, legal review, the various and sundry other things you would expect, all the way down to mayoral review and signature. So this is something.
City council approved them as well?
City council, I'm not sure of the regulation on city council, what they need to approve, but yeah, if that's needed, it does go before council.
Okay. Discussion about that. Mr. White?
Now, I've got a question about process on some other issue.
Okay.
Not that one.
All right, well, any questions about the process for approval of contracts? Shall I move on, or do you?
The contract I'm concerned about is there have been conversations that there was an ARPA agreement with firefighters for a bonus, a $10,000 bonus. And
That's on the open item list. That's,
okay, no, we asked the question and they answered it, which was that we think it's appropriate. So I don't know that.
it's scheduled to become on the agenda, I believe, of the subcommittee with more detail. Is what the
All right, so,
chair.
but no, nothing's gonna happen until we say yay or nay.
Right.
Okay.
I'll also say that.
Just, okay, I mean, I think a number of people are nay, especially since the state employees got $1,000 hazard pay, so,
This is clearly in the realm of Marb's group.
thank you. Thank you.
We'll look forward to that. All right, then the next item is list of the contracts and supporting documents concerning the city's new vehicle for the mayor. What have we got on that?
The details were brought forward, and we did discuss it at length in, the.
Subcommittee?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And the details are included in here. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything else that they would like to add, but, my concern is that what happened in the past is, it's been brought to our attention that the current administration has made changes, and that doesn't happen going forward. That's where I stand.
They've made changes since that?
That is what is being worked on right now, to make sure that.
Mr. Taylor, would you like to give us a little detail on that?
If you look at these documents, see some signatures, those two people belong to the city for various reasons.
Okay. Progress of a kind.
The person in control now, wouldn't let this pass.
Good.
I don't.
Okay.
Further than that.
Any other questions, comments from the board on that issue? All right, we'll move along to the open items list. The list was distributed with the meeting materials. I have a note suggestion to include the special meeting with the city council on the open item list, but we're going to schedule that, so that's happening. City to provide an update on the open items that the city has new information on. Do we know what that is?
Yeah, just a couple, the first one, just a comment on, item 8, consolidation of pension investment management. As you know, with, 2 unincorporated fire districts, everything's negotiations. One of the districts is amenable. Unfortunately, the other is a solid no. So, for this to go forward, a change in residents, a change in people who are firemen, I don't know what it would take. I just think it's dead. So that's my opinion on it. It's the opinion that others I've talked to, trying to weigh it in.
Mr. White?
The ARPA funds that we talked about for the firefighter bonus, that was only to go to Allentown personnel and not the other 2?
No, what they're requesting is all for.
I had a thought.
Yeah, I
To
know what
connect
it is.
those 2 items.
Yes, I anticipated that, sir.
Other open items that we have any information on? Questions about the open items list?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were through. I was looking at my next comment.
Oh, please
So
make
number
them.
17, I did provide the OPM with a picture of the completed shower with it running. So that project is complete. The other code resident questions I have started looking at, but it's going to take some time to develop the answers. The other item, I think I've already mentioned, number 23, you were looking for fire districts benchmarking. As I said before, it's very difficult to benchmark against the various districts in the state as provided by CPM. Everybody does it a different way, and it's unfortunate. And the other thing, the other sort of two-parter is on number 23. Possible consolidation was included in the comment. Once again, a difficult situation. I don't think it would be hard to convince the firehouses. Well, I do think it would be hard to convince the firehouses to consolidate. I don't see that they're going to want two. My understanding, I have not looked at this report, is that studies have been done since 1940 to the present. The most recent one, every single one has indicated there would be an increase in cost, an increase in mill rate to citizens if you did consolidate the firehouses. There are a number of factors into that, including pensions as well as salaries that would impact that. However, so I don't see a lot of impetus to consolidate firehouses with the result being an increase in taxes. So that's where we are on that.
Questions on that item? Comments? Any other items that are open that you have new information on?
One addition, number 24, I did not, it's a rather easy thing to answer. Checks can be signed by the finance director, currently me, the treasurer, Michael Lapp, and in the case where we need to sign a check and one of those two people is not available, the mayor can sign a check. This is the complete list of people who are allowed to sign checks, and each check must have 2 signatures. That's the end.
Anything else on the open items list? Mr. Hamilton?
Yeah, if I could go back to the pension investment management services, and just, I think it's really unfortunate that, you're not getting the kind of cooperation you need to pursue that. And this is sort of picking up on Mr. White frequently talks about sunshine as being one of the tools that we have available to us. And one of the things that I would be interested in knowing, and I'm not sure the best way to, request the information or gather the information, but I think we need to know, what the compensation is for all of the investment managers and investment advisors for each of these pension funds, number one. And number two, I think we need to know whether or not, I've certainly heard of instances where there have been, say, vacations and gifts and other things that have been handed out as part of conferences that, may be held dealing with pension issues that people get invited to and get comped on. And I'm just, want to make sure that that has not happened in West Haven. And so I'm looking for some way to gather that sort of information over the last, 3 years or something like that. I don't know what the best way to gather that information is, but I think we ought to look at that. And again, I don't know, obviously, I have no reason to think that anything is, happen along those lines, but, it certainly, I've heard of other cases where it has, so.
Ms. Kennison, can we add that to the open items list of questions for the city to provide information relevant to Mr. Hamilton's concerns?
Yes, and I will say that as we did some research on this in the past, one of the items that came to our attention is that they have an investment manager, the person who is doing the investing. They do not have an advisor. Tom, you and I had already discovered that when we had this discussion before, and that is not a best practice at all. It's not a best practice for those people where those investments are, which is what your firefighter's pension.
Yep.
They should want that to happen for themselves.
Yep. If you could provide that information, and I'm sure Whittlesey may have an opinion about that as well. Mr. Waxenberg, you have your hand up?
Yes, I don't know if it was an open item, but I know that Cone Resnick identified the overtime issue and the comp time issue and bonuses and things of that nature. I need to have clarity as to the difference between overtime and compensation and comp time. In other words, is it contractual? You can't get both, I wouldn't think. So I guess for the subcommittee or for me, I need to know what the practice is or policy is regarding comp time overtime has got to be contractual, and the process by which it is authorized. And then the other issue is bonuses. Who decided what bonuses were given to what people and for what purposes? Cone resident couldn't find out what the answer was. Maybe Mr. Taylor can go back and look and say, okay, you got a $10,000 bonus. Can we remember what it was for? But I appreciate those responses. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I was struggling with the open items as they were written. I will say that all comp time and overtime are contractual determined. And there is no duplication of comp time and overtime for the same hours. They are separate.
Then Mr. White.
Do department heads have contracts?
Those that are not appointed or elected, all are represented by
Department heads represented by you.
including myself.
And that is clearly contractual.
Yes.
But appointed and elected.
The elected is totally determined.
Right, that's by charter, but the appointed, do they have contracts or is it
At will, I believe. At will hiring. I mean, you know, they.
Right, you get a letter, you're gonna be employed at this, and you get a car, and you get these perks. So that
Most do not get a car, but a number.
Right. Okay, so that's actually contractual, but it's a letter. And it would say you get overtime, you don't get overtime.
Most of the appointed individuals are, their compensation, their employment contract, if you will, is tied, whether increases or how many hours they're supposed to work, and those are tied to a union contract. While they're not represented by the union, if that union were to get an increase. So with DAG, for example, and if, you know,
And that is by custom or in the letter agreement between the city and the employees?
I can't speak to the letter, never seen one, sorry, but it would be clearly spelled out. I know my letter was clearly spelled out, I just happened to be under representation, so I would assume that.
But you're in the union as
I am,
opposed to,
yes.
some people
And I
not in the union.
I can find that out.
Yeah, could you, I think,
Yeah.
especially department heads.
Yeah.
And then
Appointed
all of the department heads are represented by the union?
We do have some appointed department
Okay.
heads. As if I were the finance director straight out, I'd be an appointed person. But I am the assistant finance director, acting as
Okay.
the finance
Yeah,
director.
that's something that I think you could do it very quickly, just, here are the department heads and here's their deal. But that, I know we've had some issues where we're sort of doing increases on some labor contract, and, you know, there were some issues about certain city council people who are retired public safety folks get the benefit of that. And I think the answer was no, but sort of like good to nail it down.
Mr. Waxenberg, you have your hand up? Nope, okay. Any other questions about open items? Comments about open items? All right. Thank you for coming today. Appreciate the effort. Valiant and diligent.
Thank you for your approval of our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Town of Sprague, Subcommittee update. There was a written update provided with some reading materials. What's the update on Sprague?
At the subcommittee, they came forth with their FY '22 audit and their management letter, and they have an unmodified opinion, which their auditor, which is King and King, Sean O'Grady, he presented their audit at that time, and the overall fund balance. The grant total fund balance is at 450K, and that still remains below the 5%, so they are in a position where they have to repay back their loan to, on the municipal recovery funds that we gave them, and they have paid down and shifted from that, which was planned to do that, to pay down their internal service fund by 413,000. They did not put that in the budget for the upcoming year, as it's planned that this year's surplus of FY '23 will result in surplus that will cover and close out the outstanding internal service deficit, which is all great news. They had no audit findings, and they are really doing in great shape working collectively with the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed brought forth their budget at the time, and because they're so small, I thought that we would, and we didn't have a lot of changes. It did not have a 5-year plan as of yet, so we're going to hold until we see the 5-year plan to make sure that that budget is solid. And there was some discussion around the grand list, because the grand list has increased this year, and the increase is 34.6%, so therefore they are proposing a decrease in their mill rate, because the overall tax base, will rise, and they're looking for a substantial decrease. At this point, we put them on hold and pause on that until we can see the 5-year plan, and give some better advice on whether they should go from a 36.25 down to a 28.10, because we don't know if the out years have a gap. Then you see close. And our next meeting of the subcommittee is on April 27th.
Questions about the Sprague subcommittee update, Mr. White?
Just a quick question. I know we had asked this before, but if, for Sprague to leave Marb supervision, you had said there were a couple of audited things that have to show that they were balanced. If their 23 audited numbers are good, are they done?
They should be, yes, if everything comes
If
through,
it-
fine, yes.
Okay, so by spring of 24, we should
Or
start building on the crypto rise.
yes, as soon as their audit can get presented, then we can take it.
And it is not a condition that they repay Marb by the time they leave.
No, it's not. And we're gonna just have the recommendations, that we're gonna discuss with the secretary.
Okay, good.
So we also have their monthly, any other questions about that? I'll wait. We also have monthly financial report for February 23 for Sprague, was distributed with the meeting materials. If board members have questions, we will contact the town for responses. Any questions at this time? You can certainly submit those at your leisure to the staff at any time. So that, I think, concludes our work on Sprague today. Our second to last item is other business. Anybody have other business to flag? Questions, discussions? Not seeing anything. Then the last item is to adjourn.
So
Mr. White moves adjournment. It's not debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries. We stand adjourned until our next, until our next meeting. We'll let you know about that. Thank you all for coming. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting, but we will endeavor to do better. Thank you all.
Thank you.
you're gonna fix that in the biennial budget.
That's it. Clearly, Connecticut State University was